Rashford's going to shoot. Oh!
راشفورد جول رافينيا.
الله الإنجليزي يعود.
Marcus Rashford being sent back to Manchester United after producing 28 direct goal involvements in 26 starts has left football fans asking one massive question. How could Barcelona possibly let him go? On paper, the decision makes almost no sense. Rashford arrived in Catalonia after a difficult period at Manchester United, adapted quickly to La Liga, helped Barcelona compete for the title, and became a popular figure inside the dressing room. And yet, when Barcelona had the opportunity to make his move permanent for around €30 million, they reportedly chose not to do it. Instead, the club began looking at younger, more energetic attacking options. So what actually happened? How does a player produce those kinds of numbers, look comfortable at Barcelona, and still fail to convince the club to sign him permanently? The answer goes far deeper than goals and assists. Because behind Rashford's impressive statistics were three major problems: money, tactical fit, and his performances when Barcelona needed him most. On paper, Rashford's season in Catalonia looked extremely promising. He produced close to 30 direct goal contributions despite missing important stretches of the campaign. He could play from the left, operate centrally, or lead the attack when necessary. He also provided a dangerous option from set pieces and direct free kicks. And then there was the transfer clause. Around €30 million for a player with Rashford's experience and proven ability looks extremely attractive in today's transfer market. That is why many supporters expected Barcelona to simply activate the clause and keep him. But football transfers are rarely decided by statistics alone. And Barcelona's first major problem was financial. The transfer fee may have been manageable, but Rashford's salary was a completely different story. His Manchester United contract has placed him among the club's higher earners, and even after accepting a significant reduction to make the Barcelona loan possible, his salary remained a major financial commitment. For Barcelona, that matters enormously. The club has spent years trying to rebuild its financial structure and control its wage bill. So paying a relatively modest transfer fee is one thing. Committing to an enormous long-term salary package for a player who isn't guaranteed to be an undisputed starter is something completely different. And that appears to have become one of the biggest obstacles. Barcelona could potentially afford Rashford, but could they justify paying Rashford like a superstar? That was the real question. And then there was another problem: Hansi Flick's football. Flick demands an extremely aggressive style from his attackers. Barcelona play with a high defensive line, press aggressively, and expect their forwards to contribute without the ball. That means attacking talent alone isn't enough. A winger has to run. He has to press. He has to react immediately after possession is lost. And he has to maintain that intensity throughout the match. Players like Rafinha became extremely important to Flick precisely because of that work rate. Rashford, meanwhile, has always been a more complicated player. There is no question about his pace, there is no question about his finishing ability when he's confident, and there is no question that he can produce spectacular moments. But consistency without the ball has often been questioned. And in Flick's system, that can become a serious weakness. Barcelona's defensive structure depends on everyone moving together. If one attacker fails to press, the opposition can immediately find space behind him. And when you are playing with such a high defensive line, those small mistakes can become huge problems. That meant Rashford wasn't simply competing against other attackers for a starting position. He was competing against players who fit Flick's tactical demands more naturally. And then came the biggest problem of all: efficiency. Rashford's overall production looked impressive, but his conversion rate wasn't as convincing. He also missed several major opportunities, and at Barcelona, that becomes particularly important because the team creates enormous numbers of chances. If you're going to receive chance after chance, the expectation is simple. You have to punish opponents. You have to score when the game is on the line. And that brings us to the moment that may have changed everything: April. Barcelona entered one of the most demanding periods of the season. Rafinha's injury created an enormous opportunity for Rashford. This was exactly the kind of moment a marquee loanee dreams about. The team needed someone to step forward. The biggest matches were arriving. The Champions League was on the line, and Rashford had the chance to prove that Barcelona should build part of its future around him. Then came the Champions League quarter-final against Atletico Madrid. Rashford had the physical tools to dominate the match. He was one of the fastest players on the pitch. He found dangerous positions. He registered plenty of attacking involvement, but the problem was what happened when the decisive moments arrived. He had opportunities, he had chances to make the difference, and he didn't take them. Instead of turning the tie into a statement performance, Rashford left the match with more questions than answers. And that was damaging, because when a club is deciding whether to spend tens of millions of euros and commit to a huge salary, it isn't just looking at what a player does against weaker opponents. It's watching what happens when the pressure becomes unbearable. Do you disappear, or do you decide the game? According to reports and selection decisions, Flick's trust in Rashford appeared to weaken. For the return leg, Rashford was no longer the obvious solution, and that was a major warning sign. When a manager would rather adjust his formation or use another player in an attacking position than rely on an expensive loanee, the message is difficult to ignore. Barcelona had already seen the impressive numbers. They knew Rashford could score. They knew he could create. They knew he had the pace to destroy defenders. The question was whether he could consistently deliver everything Flick's system demanded. And apparently, the answer wasn't convincing enough. That is why the Barcelona decision makes more sense when you look beyond the headline statistics. This wasn't simply about Rashford being a bad player. It wasn't about Barcelona suddenly forgetting how talented he is. It was about the club asking a much harder question. Is Rashford worth the financial commitment, the tactical compromise, and the long-term risk? And Barcelona appears to have decided that the answer was no. Instead, the club began looking toward younger and more energetic attacking profiles, players capable of pressing relentlessly, covering huge amounts of ground, and fitting Flick's system without requiring the entire structure to be adjusted around them. For Rashford, that meant the Barcelona dream was over. After a season in which he had looked increasingly comfortable in Catalonia, he was suddenly heading back to Manchester. And now his career has entered a completely different chapter. Rashford returns to Manchester United with something to prove. The pressure will be enormous. Because Barcelona's decision has created a fascinating situation. If Rashford returns to Old Trafford and rediscovers his best form, scores consistently, and becomes one of Europe's most dangerous attackers again, Barcelona's decision will inevitably be questioned. But if the same inconsistencies continue, then Barcelona's decision will look increasingly justified. And that is what makes this story so fascinating. Rashford didn't fail because he lacked talent. He didn't fail because he couldn't play at Barcelona. He failed to make the move permanent because football at the highest level is about much more than goals and assists. It's about money. It's about tactical compatibility. It's about consistency. And most importantly, it's about what you do when the pressure is at its absolute highest. Barcelona had the option to keep Marcus Rashford. They looked at the numbers, they looked at the wages, they looked at Flick's system, and they looked at the biggest moments of the season. In the end, they decided to walk away. Now Rashford has returned to Manchester United, and the biggest question is no longer why Barcelona rejected him, it's whether Rashford can make them regret it.